the day the stars went dark. The year was 2391, and humanity had finally achieved what generations before them had only dreamed about. 52 worlds scattered across 12 star systems now bore the mark of human civilization. 22 billion people called these distant planets home. Children were born under alien suns, never knowing Earth except through stories and history lessons. Cities rose from barren moons, transforming lifeless rock into bustling centers of commerce and culture. Farms stretched across valleys on planets where no organic life had existed before human arrival. Humanity had reached for the stars and claimed their place among them. The colonies were diverse and unique. New Terra was an agricultural paradise, feeding billions across multiple systems with crops that grew in soil humanity had spent decades preparing. Horizon Station served as a primary military outpost, protecting trade routes and maintaining peace in the outer territories. Eden's Gate was known for its universities and research centers, where the brightest minds worked on technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Each world had its own character, its own story, its own reason for existing. Together, they represented humanity's greatest achievement, proof that the species could thrive anywhere, adapt to anything, and build futures worth living. But humanity was not alone in the galaxy. The Velker Collective had existed for 40,000 years, an empire so ancient that most species consider them eternal. 9 alien races had united under Velker leadership, creating a confederation that controlled thousands of star systems. Their technology was advanced beyond human comprehension. Their military had never known defeat. Their authority was absolute across vast regions of space. For centuries, the Velker had watched humanity expand with cold indifference. Humans were primitives, barely capable of faster-than-light travel, hardly worth the attention of a civilization that had mastered dimensional physics and energy manipulation. The Velker had crushed dozens of species for far less than humanity possessed. But humans were small, isolated, far from the core territories of Collective. They were insects crawling at the edge of civilized space, not worth the effort of extermination. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when a team of human archaeologists working on Epsilon Prime made a discovery that would doom their entire species. Deep beneath an ancient mountain range, buried under millions of years of geological layers, they found a vault. The structure was impossibly old, built by a civilization that had existed before the Velka themselves. Inside the vault were data crystals containing knowledge that could revolutionize human technology. Faster-than-light drives that made current human engines look like primitive rockets. Weapons capable of disrupting matter at the quantum level. Shield systems that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. The archaeologists transmitted their findings to Earth, excited by the possibilities. They had no way of knowing that the Velker monitored all transmissions in that region of space. They had no way of knowing that their discovery had just signed the death warrant for every human alive. The Velker High Council convened in their capital city on Velker Prime. 9 supreme commanders gathered in a chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. They discussed the human discovery for 6 hours, analyzing every possible outcome. Some argued that humanity was too primitive to understand the technology they had found. Others pointed out that humans were dangerously adaptable, capable of rapid advancement when given the proper tools. The debate continued until the eldest commander, a being named Tharkin who had lived for 800 years, made the final decision. Humanity possessed knowledge that could challenge Velker supremacy. If left alone, these fast-breeding apes might unlock secrets that kept the Collective dominant for millennia. The solution was clear and absolute: complete eradication protocol. Every human world would be destroyed. Every human ship would be vaporized. Every trace of human existence would be erased from the galaxy. There would be no warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. Humanity would simply cease to exist. The Velker fleet assembled in secret, gathering ships from across their empire. 600 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet, prepared for the largest military operation in recent Velker history. The commanders expected minimal resistance. Human defenses were primitive. Human weapons were ineffective against Velker shields. The operation would be swift and clean, completed in days rather than weeks. They were wrong about many things, But they were right about one fact. The killing began quickly. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded patrol vessel Defiance, a small frigate assigned to monitor the outer colonies. She was 43 years old, a career officer who had spent 20 years in space. She had seen wonders that would have amazed earlier generations. She had walked on worlds where the sky was green and the oceans were liquid methane. She had witnessed nebulae that painted space with colors human eyes had never evolved to see. Nothing in her experience prepared her for what she witnessed on that terrible day. The Defiance was conducting routine sensor sweeps near New Terra when the Velker fleet arrived. Mitchell watched her screens as one ship became 10, then 50, then 200. They appeared from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, surrounding New Terra like predators circling wounded prey. The colony had defensive platforms in orbit. It had patrol ships. It had early warning systems. Against 200 Velker warships, these defenses lasted exactly 9 minutes. Mitchell stood frozen on her bridge as the enemy opened fire. Beams of crimson energy lanced down from orbit, striking cities with surgical precision. She watched through her view screens as buildings vaporized, as entire city blocks turned to plasma, as millions of people died in seconds. The bombardment was methodical and thorough. The Velker targeted population centers first, then moved to infrastructure, then to anything that might shelter survivors. New Terra had a population of 1,400,000,000 people. Within 3 hours, it was a dead world, its surface scorched to glass, its atmosphere burning with fires that would rage for months. Mitchell wanted to fight. Every instinct screamed at her to engage the enemy, to die defending innocent people. But the Defiance was a patrol frigate with a crew of 38. Against 200 Velker warships, she might as well have thrown stones. Her first officer, Lieutenant James Chun, stood beside her with tears streaming down his face. His wife and 2 daughters lived on New Terra. They were gone now, reduced to ash along with everyone else. Mitchell made a decision that would save humanity. She ordered the Defiance to run. They would gather every piece of sensor data possible, recording everything the Velker did, how they attacked, what weapons they used, what patterns they followed. Then they would race back to Earth with proof of what was happening. The Defiance turned away from the dying world and engaged its faster-than-light drive. Behind them, New Terra burned. Ahead of them lay a galaxy that would never be the same. The distress calls came in waves. Horizon Station reported enemy contact, then went silent. Eden's Gate transmitted evacuation orders, then stopped broadcasting. One by one, across 12 star systems, human colonies fell. Some lasted hours. Some lasted minutes. None survived. The Velker were efficient and merciless. They hunted down refugee ships trying to escape. They destroyed space stations that attempted to surrender. They vaporized cargo vessels that posed no military threat. This was not war. This was extermination. The Velker wanted no survivors, no witnesses, no one left to tell the story of what happened. They failed in that goal because of Sarah Mitchell and her crew. The journey back to Earth took 13 days. 13 days of monitoring communications channels and hearing nothing but screams and static. 13 days of watching the death toll climb higher and higher as each colony fell silent. 13 days of knowing that while they ran to safety, billions of humans were dying. The crew of the Defiance lived with that knowledge every moment. Some broke down completely, unable to function. Others became cold and mechanical, shutting down their emotions to avoid the pain. Mitchell held them together through force of will and the promise of revenge. They would reach Earth. They would deliver their data. They would give humanity a chance to fight back. 22 billion people died in 96 hours. Every human colony was destroyed. The worlds that had represented humanity's future were reduced to lifeless rocks floating through space. The Velker had committed the greatest act of genocide in modern galactic history, and they had done it with cold efficiency. The Supreme Commander of the Velker fleet, a being named Corvith, transmit a final message on all human frequencies. His voice was cold and precise, like a judge reading a sentence. Your species has been evaluated and found unsuitable for continued existence. Do not resist. Accept your extinction with dignity. Your primitiveness ends today. When the Defiance finally reached Earth orbit, Mitchell transmitted everything they had recorded to every military installation on the planet. Then she sat in her captain's chair and wept. She wept for the dead. She wept for the children who would never grow up. She wept for humanity. Earth received the news in stages of horror. First came the reports of lost contact with the colonies. Then came Mitchell's data showing the systematic destruction. Then came Corvitha's message promising Earth's destruction. The governments of Earth had spent centuries arguing over borders and resources and ideologies. Old wars, old hatreds, old grudges that seemed so important yesterday meant nothing today. They had 48 hours before the Velker fleet arrived at the solar system. 48 hours to prepare for the end of everything. Secretary General Maria Santos called an emergency session of the United Nations. Every nation sent representatives. Leaders who had refused to speak to each other for decades suddenly found themselves in the same room, facing a threat that made their conflicts look like children's arguments. Santos stood before them, and she spoke words that would echo through history. We have two choices. We can die divided, or we can die as one species. I choose unity. What do you choose? The room erupted in debate, but the debate lasted only minutes. Everyone present understood the stakes. Humanity faced extinction. Personal ambitions, national interests, political ideologies, none of it mattered anymore. Within 6 hours, the Unity Declaration was signed. Every nation on Earth surrendered its sovereignty to a single governing body, the Terran War Council. Nuclear weapons were placed under unified command. Factories were converted to produce war materials. Scientists who had competed for grants now worked side by side in underground laboratories. Humanity had 42 hours to become something it had never been before. United, focused, deadly. General Marcus Kane was appointed Supreme Commander of all Terran military forces. He was 68 years old, a veteran of 3 wars who had never lost a battle. He looked at Mitchell's sensor data and understood immediately what humanity faced. They could not win, not against a fleet that had destroyed 52 worlds in 4 days, not against technology thousands of years more advanced than their own. The math was simple and brutal. But Kane also understood something else. They could fight. They could make the enemy bleed. They could die standing instead of kneeling. And perhaps, if they were clever enough and desperate enough, they could survive. Kane began issuing orders with the calm precision of a man who had accepted death. Earth's population evacuated to deep underground bunkers. Weapons platforms were rushed into orbit by the thousands. Warships that had been scheduled for decommission were brought back into service. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, exhausted and grieving, received new orders. She was given command of Earth's defense fleet. 400 ships, most of them smaller and weaker than Velker vessels. Her flagship would be the Retribution, a heavy cruiser that had been built to fight human enemies, not alien warships. Mitchell stood on the bridge of her new command and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the enemy was coming. The same enemy that had murdered 22 billion of her people. The same enemy that expected humanity to die quietly. She opened a communication channel to her fleet. Her voice was no longer broken by grief. It was hard and cold as steel. All ships, this is Admiral Mitchell. The enemy believes we are defeated. They believe we will surrender or run. They are wrong. We are humanity. We have survived plagues and ice ages and wars that should have destroyed us. We will survive this. And when we do, we will teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. You do not exterminate humanity without paying a price. She closed the channel and turned to her crew. Battle stations. The Velker are coming. Let us show them what humans do when you threaten our families. Earth waited in darkness. Billions of people huddled in underground shelters, listening to news broadcasts that promised nothing but death from above. Children cried for parents who could offer no comfort. The elderly remembered other wars and knew that this one was different, more terrible, more final. But fear did something unexpected to humanity. Instead of breaking them apart, it forged them together. Old hatreds were forgotten. Ancient grievances were set aside. In Moscow and Washington and Beijing and London, people who had been enemies yesterday worked together today. They built defenses. They prepared weapons. They said goodbye to loved ones and went to face the darkness. The Velker fleet arrived on a Wednesday morning at 0600 hours. Sensors detected them emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 600 warships, each one a floating city of destruction. At their head was a command vessel Extinction, a ship so massive it generated its own gravitational field. Commander Corvith transmitted his final offer to Earth. Surrender now and we will grant you quick deaths. Resist and your species will die screaming over years of torment. General Kane recorded humanity's response. His voice was calm and steady, like a man ordering breakfast. We have buried 22 billion of our people. We have wept for 52 worlds that will never see life again. You ask us to surrender. We answer with this. Come and take our world if you can. But know this truth. For every human you have killed, we will take 10,000 of yours. For every world you have burned, we will burn your empire to ashes. You wanted extinction. We will show you what extinction truly means. The Battle of Earth began in fire and fury, and humanity stopped being victims. The price of extinction. The Velker fleet advanced toward Earth in a formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds. 600 warships moved through space like a swarm of metallic locusts, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of Sol. They expected token resistance, followed by quick surrender. They expected humans to beg for mercy. They expected victory within hours. They were catastrophically wrong about everything. Earth's orbital defense network activated first. 12,000 automated weapons platforms surrounded the planet in overlapping layers of firepower. Each platform was controlled by artificial intelligence programmed with one directive: destroy anything that threatened humanity. The moment the Velker fleet entered firing range, 12,000 stations opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked through the void by the tens of thousands. Plasma cannons fired beams of superheated matter. Rail guns launched projectiles at relativistic speeds. The space between Earth and the approaching enemy became a storm of death. The Velker had never faced such concentrated firepower. Their shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, found themselves overwhelmed by sheer volume. The first wave of fire destroyed 97 enemy ships before they could react. Explosions lit up the darkness as warships that had existed for centuries vanished in balls of flame. The Velker formation shattered as commanders tried to adapt to an attack pattern they had never encountered. Commander Corvith watched from the bridge of the Extinction as his fleet took casualties that would have been impossible against any other species. He ordered his ships to return fire and advance through barrage. The Velker weapons were more advanced than anything humanity possessed. Single beams could vaporize a weapons platform. Missiles tracked their targets through evasive maneuvers. Energy torpedoes phased through defensive shields. The orbital platforms began dying by the hundreds, then by the thousands. For every Velker ship destroyed, humanity lost 30 defensive stations. The math was brutal, but Admiral Mitchell had planned for it. The platforms were expendable. Their purpose was not to win, but to weaken the enemy before the real battle began. Admiral Sarah Mitchell watched the carnage from the bridge of the Retribution. Her 400 ships hung in formation behind Earth's moon, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her crew was silent and focused. Every person aboard knew they were probably going to die today. They had accepted this truth and moved beyond fear into something colder and more dangerous. Mitchell waited until the Velker fleet was fully engaged in the orbital defenses, their attention divided and their formation scattered. Then she gave the order that would change galactic history. All ships attack Pattern Omega. Show them what humanity learned from their massacre. Make them bleed. The human fleet emerged from behind the moon at maximum speed. 400 warships, smaller and weaker than their enemy counterparts, but faster and more maneuverable. They did not advance in neat formations. They scattered across the battlefield like wolves attacking a herd, targeting damaged ships, exploiting gaps in enemy formations, striking from unexpected angles. The Velker expected humans to fight with honor and predictable tactics. Mitchell gave them chaos instead. The Retribution plunged into the enemy formation with all weapons firing. Missiles launched from every tube. Energy cannons carved burning lines across Velker hulls. The ship shook from return fire, but Mitchell never wavered. Around her, human captains followed her lead with desperate courage. The frigate Dauntless rammed a crippled Velker cruiser, both ships exploding in a fireball that consumed everything within a kilometer. The destroyer Vengeance fought 3 enemy vessels simultaneously, destroying 2 before succumbing to overwhelming fire. The battleship Unbreakable lived up to its name, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed lesser ships while its guns never stopped firing. The battle raged for 23 days. 23 days of constant fighting, without pause or mercy. Ships that ran out of ammunition used themselves as weapons, ramming enemy vessels in final act of defiance. Crews that knew their ships were dying set courses for enemy formations and activated self-destruct sequences. Pilots and small fighters attacked warships 1,000 times their size, looking for weak points and exploiting them with suicidal bravery. Humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They fought with the fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. The price of extinction. The Velker fleet advanced toward Earth in a formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds. 600 warships moved through space like a swarm of metallic locusts, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of Sol. They expected token resistance, followed by quick surrender. They expected humans to beg for mercy. They expected victory within hours. They were catastrophically wrong about everything. Earth's orbital defense network activated first. 12,000 automated weapons platforms surrounded the planet in overlapping layers of firepower. Each platform was controlled by artificial intelligence programmed with one directive: destroy anything that threatened humanity. The moment the Velker fleet entered firing range, 12,000 stations opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked through the void by the tens of thousands. Plasma cannons fired beams of superheated matter. Rail guns launched projectiles at relativistic speeds. The space between Earth and the approaching enemy became a storm of death. The Velker had never faced such concentrated firepower. Their shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, found themselves overwhelmed by sheer volume. The first wave of fire destroyed 97 enemy ships before they could react. Explosions lit up the darkness as warships that had existed for centuries vanished in balls of flame. The Velker formation shattered as commanders tried to adapt to an attack pattern they had never encountered. Commander Corvith watched from the bridge of the extinction as his fleet took casualties that would have been impossible against any other species. He ordered his ships to return fire and advance through the barrage. The Velker weapons were more advanced than anything humanity possessed. Single beams could vaporize a weapons platform. Missiles tracked their targets through evasive maneuvers. Energy torpedoes phased through defensive shields. The orbital platforms began dying by the hundreds, then by the thousands. For every Velker ship destroyed, humanity lost 30 defensive stations. The math was brutal, but Admiral Mitchell had planned for it. The platforms were expendable. Their purpose was not to win, but to weaken the enemy before the real battle began. Admiral Sarah Mitchell watched the carnage from the bridge of the Retribution. Her 400 ships hung in formation behind Earth's moon, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her crew was silent and focused. Every person aboard knew they were probably going to die today. They had accepted this truth and moved beyond fear into something colder and more dangerous. Mitchell waited until the Velker fleet was fully engaged with the orbital defenses, their attention divided and their formation scattered. Then she gave the order that would change galactic history. All ships, attack pattern Omega. Show them what humanity learned from their massacre. Make them bleed. The human fleet emerged from behind the moon at maximum speed. 400 warships, smaller and weaker than their enemy counterparts, but faster and more maneuverable. They did not advance in neat formations. They scattered across the battlefield like wolves attacking a herd, targeting damaged ships, exploiting gaps in enemy formations, striking from unexpected angles. The Velker expected humans to fight with honor and predictable tactics. Mitchell gave them chaos instead. The Retribution plunged into the enemy formation with all weapons firing. Missiles launched from every tube. Energy cannons carved burning lines across Velker hulls. The ship shook from return fire, but Mitchell never wavered. Around her, human captains followed her lead with desperate courage. The frigate Dauntless rammed the crippled Velker cruiser, both ships exploding in a fireball that consumed everything within a kilometer. The destroyer Vengeance fought 3 enemy vessels simultaneously, destroying 2 before succumbing to overwhelming fire. The battleship Unbreakable lived up to its name, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed lesser ships while its guns never stopped firing. The battle raged for 23 days. 23 days of constant fighting, without pause or mercy. Ships that ran out of ammunition used themselves as weapons, ramming enemy vessels in final act of defiance. Crews that knew their ships were dying set courses for enemy formations and activated self-destruct sequences. Pilots and small fighters attacked warships 1,000 times their size, looking for weak points and exploiting them with suicidal bravery. Humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They fought with the fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. Admiral David Cross took command of the defense when Mitchell's flagship was crippled on the 8th day. He was 61 years old, a tactical genius who had spent his career studying historical battles and learning from victories and defeats across human history. He brought that knowledge to bear against an enemy that had never faced unconventional warfare. Cross ordered his ships to stop fighting like a traditional fleet. Instead, they became guerrilla fighters in space. They hid behind asteroids and emerged to strike exposed targets. They used debris fields as cover. They exploited the fact that Velker's ships were designed for open battle and struggled in close-quarters chaos. The turning point came on the 15th day when Dr. Elena Reeves made a discovery that changed everything. She was working in an underground laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, leading a team of physicists who had not slept in days. They were analyzing captured Velker technology, looking for any weakness they could exploit. Reeves found in the enemy shield systems. Velker shields operated by creating a dimensional barrier that deflected energy and matter. The technology was incredibly advanced, but it had one critical flaw. The shields required a specific frequency to maintain dimensional stability. If that frequency could be disrupted, the shields would collapse catastrophically. Reeves transmitted her findings to Admiral Cross immediately. Within 6 hours, human engineers had designed and built quantum disruption weapons based on her discovery. The devices were crude and required ships to get dangerously close to enemy vessels before firing. But they worked. The first test came when the destroyer Defiant fired a disruption pulse at a Velker battleship. The enemy's shields flickered and collapsed. Conventional human weapons suddenly became effective. The Velker ship was torn apart by missile fire within seconds. Cross ordered every ship to be equipped with the new weapons. The production facilities on Earth and Mars worked without stopping, building disruptors by the thousands. Human ships began hunting Velker vessels with new confidence. They would close the point-blank range, fire the disruption pulse, then unleash everything they had. The Velker suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Their technological advantage was neutralized. The battle became about courage and determination rather than superior equipment. In that contest, humanity had already proven they would never surrender. Commander Corvith realized on the 18th day that he had made a terrible mistake. His fleet, which had arrived with 600 ships, was now reduced to fewer than 250. He had underestimated humanity in every possible way. He had thought them weak, but they fought with desperate strength. He had thought them primitive, but they adapted and innovated faster than any species he had encountered. He had thought them divided, but they stood together with unity his own empire had never achieved. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Velker collective faced the possibility of military defeat. Corvith requested reinforcements from Velker Prime. The High Council debated for 2 days before sending their response. No additional ships would be sent. The Council had reviewed sensor data from battle and reached a disturbing conclusion. Humanity was too dangerous. If they could inflict such casualties while defending a single world, what would they do if given time to build a proper war fleet? The Council ordered Corvith to withdraw. The operation had failed. The Velker would retreat and reconsider their strategy. On the 23rd day of battle, the remaining Velker ships turned and fled. They engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished from Earth orbit, leaving behind debris fields and burning wrecks. Humanity had lost 312 of their 400 ships. The orbital defense network was destroyed. Casualties numbered in the millions. But they had won. For the first time in recorded history, the Velker Collective had been defeated in open battle. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of his battered flagship and watched the enemy retreat. Around him, exhausted crew members wept and cheered and collapsed from relief. He felt none of those emotions. He felt only cold fury. The Velker had murdered 22 billion humans. They had destroyed 52 worlds. They had tried to exterminate his species. And now they were running away as if this was over, as if humanity would simply rebuild and forget. Cross opened a communication channel that would broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every species in Velker space would hear his words. Every world would know what happened at Earth. You came to our home seeking our extinction. You found something else. You found a species that refuses to die. You wanted to erase humanity from existence. Instead, you have awakened something terrible. We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will not stop. You wanted war. We will give you extinction. The message ended. The galaxy listened in shock. The primitive humans had not only survived, but had defeated the mighty Velker. And now they were promising revenge on a scale that terrified every species that heard those words. The Velker High Council convened an emergency session. They debated for a week about how to respond. Some argued for peace negotiations. Others demanded a larger fleet be assembled to finish what they started. The council could not reach consensus. While they argued, humanity acted. General Marcus Kane did not wait for the enemy to recover. He understood that humanity had won a defensive battle, but the war was far from over. The Velker would return with more ships and better preparation. Earth might hold once, but a second assault could succeed where the first had failed. The solution was simple and brutal. Do not wait for them to attack. Strike first. Strike hard. Strike without mercy. Operation Ghost Knife launched 6 weeks after the Battle of Earth ended. Colonel Marcus Webb led a force of 5,000 special operations soldiers on a mission that would have been considered impossible before the war. They would infiltrate Velker territory using captured enemy ships. They would operate behind enemy lines for as long as necessary. They would destroy infrastructure, assassinate leaders, and spread fear throughout the Velker Empire. They would become the nightmare that made the enemy afraid to sleep. Webb and his teams departed on stolen Velker vessels that had been captured during the battle. The ships were damaged and barely functional, but they had working identification codes and transponders. They would appear to sensors as legitimate Velker military craft. The team spent months traveling through enemy territory, studying their targets and preparing for operations that would change the course of the war. Webb understood that traditional military tactics would not work against an empire that controlled thousands of star systems. Humanity needed to fight smart rather than fair. The first target was a major fuel depot in the Karnak system. Velker warships required exotic matter for their faster-than-light drives. The Karnak depot supplied fuel for the entire Eastern Fleet. Webb's team infiltrated the facility disguised as Velker workers. They spent 3 days planning explosives in critical locations. When the charges detonated, the resulting explosion was visible from orbit. The depot and everything within 50 kilometers was vaporized. The Velker lost enough fuel to operate 200 warships for a year. More importantly, they lost the sense of safety they had maintained for 40,000 years. If humans could strike here, they could strike anywhere. The attacks continued for months. Communication relays went dark without warning. Supply convoys disappeared in transit. Military commanders were assassinated in their own homes. The Velker tried to hunt down Webb's teams, but the humans were ghosts, striking from nowhere and vanishing before reinforcement arrived. The psychological impact was devastating. Velker citizens who had never known fear began to understand terror. Their government, which had promised safety and supremacy, could not protect them from an enemy that refused to fight fair. Back on Earth, Dr. Reeves and her teams continued developing new weapons. The war had revealed humanity's greatest advantage over the Velker. The ancient empire relied on technology that had remained largely unchanged for millennia. They were powerful but stagnant. Humanity was primitive but innovative. They adapted faster, experimented more freely, and were willing to try solutions that the Velka would consider beneath them. Reeves weaponized this advantage ruthlessly. Her laboratory produced weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Viral artificial intelligence programs that infected Velka computer systems and turned their own ships against them. Nanomachine swarms that consumed metal and left ships as floating wrecks. Dimensional bombs that created temporary black holes capable of swallowing entire fleets. Some of these weapons were used immediately. Others were held in reserve, insurance against the day when the Velka returned in force. The most terrible weapon was never deployed, but its existence changed everything. Reeves developed a biological agent designed to target Velka genetic markers. The virus would kill every member of the Velka species, while leaving other life forms completely unharmed. It was genocide in a bottle, extinction that could be delivered by a single infected individual. Reeves presented the weapon to General Kane with trembling hands. She understood what she had created. Kane looked at the vial containing enough death to erase an entire species from existence. He locked it away in the deepest vault on Earth and prayed it would never be needed. The Velker learned about the biological weapon through their intelligence networks. The knowledge terrified them. They had started this war intending to exterminate humanity. Now they faced the very real possibility of their own extinction. Suddenly, the High Council's debates about military strategy took on new urgency. Some argued that humanity must be destroyed before they could use such terrible weapons. Others pointed out that any attack on Earth might trigger the release of the virus. The Velker found themselves trapped by the consequences of their own actions. Admiral Mitchell recovered from her injuries and returned to command 6 months after the Battle of Earth. She was given a new fleet and a simple directive from General Kane: make them pay. Mitchell took her orders literally. She led raids deep into Velker territory, targeting not military installations but economic infrastructure. She destroyed shipyards that had built vessels for thousands of years. She attacked agricultural worlds that fed Velker populations. She interrupted trade routes that had operated safely since before human civilization existed. Her campaign was designed to inflict maximum economic damage and remind the Velker that humanity would never forgive their attempted genocide. The war continued for 18 months after the Battle of Earth. 18 months of human raids and Velker suffering. 18 months of an ancient empire learning what it meant to face an enemy that would not accept defeat. The Velker lost over 2,000 ships in scattered engagements across their territory. Their economy contracted for the first time in recorded history. 3 member species withdrew from the collective, preferring independence to continued association with a failing empire. Colonel Webb returned to Earth after 20 months behind enemy lines. His teams had suffered 50% casualties, but they had accomplished their mission. The Velker military was in disarray. Their citizens lived in fear. Their government was paralyzed by indecision. Webb reported directly to General Kane in the underground command center. The younger officer who had departed Earth was gone. In his place stood a harder man, someone who had done terrible things in service of his species' survival. Kane understood completely. The war had changed everyone who fought in it. The Velker High Council finally requested peace negotiations in late 2393. They sent diplomatic vessels to neutral territory, carrying messages that admitted defeat without using the word. Humanity's response was delivered by Secretary General Santos herself. Her words were broadcast across the galaxy so every species would understand the price of threatening Earth. Return our dead, and we will talk. The diplomats had no answer. 22 billion humans were beyond return. The negotiations ended before they began. General Kane assembled his commanders for a final briefing. The war room was filled with officers who had spent 2 years fighting, bleeding, and watching friends die. They were tired beyond measure. They were ready for whatever came next. Kane activated the main display. A star map appeared showing a single system deep in Velker territory. Velker Prime, the home world of the species that had started this war, the heart of an empire that had ruled for 40,000 years. The time for raids is over. Kane said quietly, the time for mercy has passed. We are going to invade their home world. We are going to break their empire. And we are going to make certain that no species in this galaxy ever threatens humanity again. The room was silent. Every officer understood what this meant. The largest military operation in human history, an invasion of a world that had never known conquest, a final reckoning with an enemy that had tried to exterminate them. Admiral Mitchell spoke for everyone present. "When do we leave?" Kane smiled without humor. "Immediately. Assemble every ship we have. Call in every favor. Activate every reserve unit. We're going to show the Velker what extinction truly means." The Terran Armada departed Earth 6 weeks later. 3,000 warships, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, supported by troop transports carrying 2 million soldiers. They were equipped with the best weapons Earth could produce. They were trained for urban combat on an alien world. They were ready to fight an enemy that had never surrendered in 40,000 years of dominance. The journey took 4 weeks. 4 weeks of final preparations and quiet determination. Everyone aboard understood that many would not return. They had accepted this reality long ago. The Velker detected the human fleet 2 days before it arrived at their homeworld. Commander Corvith, who had led the attack on humanity's colonies, was given command of the defense. He assembled every available ship, calling in reserve from across the Empire. By the time the human fleet arrived, 400 Velker warships waited in orbit around their sacred home. It was not enough. It would never be enough. The Battle of Velker Prime began at dawn on the planet's surface. The automated weapons arrived first, 10,000 drones and missiles saturating the orbital defenses. The Velker destroyed them by the thousands, but more kept coming. Their shields faltered. Their weapons overheated. Their formations broke apart under pressure they had never experienced before. Then the main fleet engaged. Admiral Mitchell led from the front, her ship diving into enemy formations like a predator among prey. The Velker fought with desperate courage, defending their home with everything they possessed. They destroyed human ships by the dozens. But for every human vessel that fell, 2 Velker ships died. The mathematics of destruction favored Earth. The orbital battle lasted 2 days. When it ended, Velker space superiority was broken. The path to the surface was clear. Colonel Webb led the first wave of dropships through the atmosphere. Anti-aircraft fire turned the sky into a storm of death. Hundreds of transports exploded before reaching the ground, but thousands more survived. Webb's boots touched alien soil at the capital city's edge. Around him, human soldiers poured from their transports, weapons ready, eyes cold with purpose. The ground war had begun. The fighting lasted 60 days. 60 days of brutal urban combat through a city that had stood for 20,000 years. The Velker refused to surrender. Their religion demanded they defend sacred ground to the last soldier. Human forces matched their determination with overwhelming firepower. Buildings that had survived millennia crumbled under human artillery. Streets that had never known war became killing fields. The casualties were staggering on both sides. But humanity had come to finish this war. They would accept nothing less than total victory. On the 59th day, Webb's forces reached the Supreme Citadel, the center of Velker government for 40,000 years. The ancient fortress was defended by elite warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The battle for the walls lasted 20 hours. When it ended, human soldiers stormed through shattered gates into halls that had never known defeat. Commander Corvith died fighting in the central chamber, weapon in hand, until the very end. The Velker High Council surrendered the next morning. General Kane arrived on Velker Prime to accept the surrender personally. He walked through the ruins of the Supreme Citadel, stepping over debris and bodies until he reached the throne room where the council waited. 9 Supreme Commanders stood in a line, their robes torn, their faces showing resignation. The eldest spoke with the weight of millennia. "You have won. What will you do now? Will you exterminate us as we tried to exterminate you?" Kane looked at them for a long moment. He thought about the 22 billion dead. He thought about the 52 worlds that would never see life again. He thought about the children who had grown up knowing only war and hatred. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flag, blue and green on white background, the flag of unified Earth. He planted it in the rubble at his feet. "This is what extinction looks like. Your empire is finished. Your power is broken. You will live, but as a lesson, you will tell every species in this galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. You will remember this day for the next 40,000 years. And you will never forget that we showed you mercy when you showed us none. The Velker Collective dissolved 3 months later. 9 species that had ruled together separated and returned to their own worlds. The Velker themselves were confined to their home planet. Their ability to threaten anyone destroyed forever. Humanity claimed the 52 colony worlds as their own once more. They also claimed reparations in technology, resources, and territory. The dead could never return, but their memory would live forever in an empire built on their graves. Admiral Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched as the last human ships departed Velker Prime. She was 50 years old now, aged beyond her years by war and loss, but her eyes still held fire. She opened a final communication to the conquered world below. We came from Earth as explorers and dreamers. You turn us into warriors and killers. Remember that transformation. Remember that you created the monster you feared. And remember that humanity will never forgive what you did to us. The war was over. Humanity had survived, but they had paid a terrible price. They had become something darker, harder, more dangerous. The innocence that sent colony ships to the stars was gone forever. In its place stood a species that would never again be victims. The galaxy had learned a lesson written in blood and fire. You do not threaten humanity. You do not attack their families. You do not try to exterminate them, because if you do, they will show you what extinction truly means, and they will make you beg for the mercy you never offered them. Earth had answered genocide with total war, and the galaxy would never forget.